The tycoon froze when he saw the maid's necklace. It was the other half of the piece he had kept for 30 years. The crash came first, then the silence. Marcus Blackwood's phone hit the marble floor of his penthouse office with a sound that seemed to echo through 30 years of carefully built walls around his heart. The call had been simple enough. His assistant, Margaret, had just informed him that the spring renovation crew at Mountain View Resort had found something. Something that would change everything. But that morning, as his private jet descended toward the Colorado mountains, Marcus had no idea his perfectly controlled world was about to shatter. He was thinking about quarterly reports, about the board meeting next week, about anything except the strange pull he'd been feeling toward this particular resort for months now. The same resort where he'd been manufacturing excuses to visit, inventing unnecessary business meetings, all because of a face that haunted his dreams. The face belonged to a housekeeper, a young woman with dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets older than her 25 years. Every time he saw her arranging towels by the pool or tending to the mountain gardens with such tender care, something twisted in his chest, something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. Her name was Elena Rodriguez, and she moved through the resort like she belonged there in a way that had nothing to do with employment. There was grace in how she touched the flowers, reverence in how she cleaned each room, as if she was caring for something precious rather than just doing her job. And that medallion, that damn medallion that caught the morning light as it rested against her throat, sending little flashes that made his heart race for reasons he couldn't name. Marcus had built his hotel empire on instincts, on reading people, on knowing when something didn't fit. Elena didn't fit. She was too careful with the antique furniture, too knowledgeable about the resort's history, too comfortable in spaces that should have intimidated a small-town girl working to pay off debts, because that's what Margaret's discreet investigation had revealed. Elena Rodriguez, former architecture student, financially ruined by a fiancé who'd stolen her life savings and disappeared into the night. The betrayal story had hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd been 28 when his own partner had sold their first hotel project to competitors, walking away with everything they'd built together. The memory of that betrayal still burned, but somehow Elena's story hurt worse. Maybe because she seemed so young, so trusting, despite everything. Maybe because when she smiled at the elderly guests, helping them navigate the mountain paths, he saw something he'd lost decades ago. Trust. Pure, uncomplicated trust in the goodness of people. 3 months he'd been watching her. 3 months of finding reasons to walk past the pool when she worked there, of reviewing security footage just to see her face, of lying awake in his Manhattan penthouse, wondering what her laugh sounded like when she was truly happy. He felt like a fool. A 60-year-old man obsessing over a girl young enough to be his daughter. But there was something about Elena that felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. The storm hit on a Wednesday. Not just any storm, but the kind of mountain tempest that transforms familiar landscapes into alien worlds. Marcus had been reviewing contracts in the resort's library when the first tree came down, blocking the main road. By evening, 3 feet of snow had fallen, and the power lines were down. The resort was completely cut off from the outside world. That's when he found Elena in the kitchen, calmly organizing supplies by candlelight. She looked up when he entered, and for the first time in 3 months they were truly alone. No staff bustling around, no guests to maintain professional distance for. Just the two of them and the storm raging outside. "Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, her voice carrying a slight accent that made his name sound like music. "I was making an inventory. We have enough food for about a week, assuming the road's clear by then." Smart thinking. He moved closer, drawn by the warm circle of candlelight around her. "Have you done this before? Emergency management?" Eleanor's hands stilled on the clipboard. "My grandfather owned a small inn in New Mexico. When I was little, I spent summers there. He taught me to always be prepared for storms." Her fingers unconsciously touched the medallion at her throat. "He said storms reveal who people really are." Something in her tone made Marcus step closer. "What happened to the inn?" "He died when I was 16. My grandmother sold it to pay for his medical bills." Elena's voice remained steady, but Marcus caught the slight tremor in her hands. "That's when I decided to study architecture. I wanted to build places where families could make memories. Safe places, lasting places, The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Lasting places. How many hotels had he built? How many properties had he acquired? All in search of something that would last. And here was this young woman who understood what he'd been chasing his entire life. What about your parents? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Eleanor went very still. The candlelight flickered across her face, highlighting the shadows under her eyes. I don't know who they were. I grew up at St. Catherine's Home for Children in Kansas. Sister Maria used to tell us that sometimes families are made by choice, not blood. She touched the medallion again. This was the only thing they left with me. Half of a heart with some kind of inscription I could never fully read. The room spun. Marcus gripped the edge of the counter as his vision blurred. Half of a heart. He'd carried the other half in his wallet for 31 years, never knowing why he couldn't throw it away. It had belonged to Isabella. Beautiful, passionate Isabella, who'd loved him with a fire that had consumed them both. The woman who'd disappeared one winter night after their worst fight, leaving only a note saying she couldn't live in his world of wealth and expectations. Mr. Blackwood, are you all right? Elena's voice seemed to come from very far away. He looked at her face, really looked, and suddenly understood why she'd seemed so familiar. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her mouth, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. It was Isabella's face, softened by youth, gentled by different experiences, but unmistakably connected to the only woman he'd ever truly loved. I need to show you something, he said, his voice hoarse. With trembling hands, he pulled out his wallet and extracted the small, worn piece of metal he'd carried for 3 decades, half of a heart, with an inscription in Spanish that had faded but never disappeared entirely. Eleanor gasped. Her medallion fell from nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor. Marcus bent to pick it up, and as he held both pieces together, they formed a perfect whole. The inscription, complete now, read, "Para mi corazón donde quiera que esté," for my heart, wherever it may be. This is impossible, Elena whispered, but she was reaching for the complete medallion, her fingers brushing his as she traced the familiar words. My mother. They told me my mother was just a teenager who couldn't keep me. What was her name? Marcus could barely breathe. Did they tell you her name? Isabella. Isabella Santos. Elena's dark eyes searched his face. Why? Do you know something about her? The world shifted. Everything Marcus thought he knew about his life, about loss, about the emptiness that had driven him to build an empire, suddenly rearranged itself around this impossible truth. Eleanor wasn't just reminiscent of Isabella. She was Isabella's daughter. But that meant... Marcus's mind raced through the timeline. Isabella had disappeared in February. Eleanor was born in November. The math was simple and devastating. She was someone I knew a long time ago. He couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not until he was sure. Not until he understood what this meant for both of them. Elena stared at the complete medallion in her palm. She tried to come back, didn't she? To find me. It wasn't a question. Somehow, looking at his face, she knew. What happened to her? Marcus closed his eyes. He'd hired investigators over the years, always telling himself it was just curiosity. The reports had been heartbreaking. Isabella had tried to return multiple times. His own family had blocked her. His father, his brother David, they'd all conspired to keep her away, claiming she was a gold digger who would destroy the Blackwood name. She died in a car accident when Elena was 15, alone, still carrying a letter she'd never sent explaining everything. The storm's getting worse, Marcus said instead, because he was a coward, and she deserved better than to learn the truth from a coward. We should get some rest. But as Elena nodded and gathered her supplies, Marcus saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Suspicion, intelligence, questions that wouldn't be ignored forever. Outside, the storm raged with unprecedented fury, as if nature itself was responding to the upheaval in Marcus's heart. He watched Elena disappear down the hallway toward the staff quarters, and he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. His phone had no signal. The roads would be impassable for days. He was trapped in this place with the daughter of the only woman he'd ever loved, carrying secrets that could destroy them both. And somewhere in his gut, he felt the familiar twist of dread that meant David knew something. His younger brother had always been too interested in Marcus's personal life, too eager to protect the family reputation at any cost. Marcus made his way to his private suite, but sleep was impossible. He stood at the window watching the snow fall and wondered what Isabella would think of the woman her daughter had become. Strong, resilient, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with the light that seemed to emanate from her core. Dawn brought no relief from the storm, but it brought something else. Eleanor, standing in his doorway with coffee and a determination in her eyes that reminded him sharply of her mother. "We need to talk," she said simply, "about the medallion, about my mother, about why you look like you've seen a ghost every time you see me." Marcus took the coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. The moment of truth was coming whether he was ready or not. And somewhere in the distance, barely audible over the wind, his phone was buzzing with missed calls from David. The coffee grew cold between them as Elena waited. Marcus could see her mother's stubbornness in the set of her jaw, the way she held her ground despite the obvious power imbalance. 30 years melted away, and he was 29 again, facing Isabella across a similar silence, knowing that everything he said next would change both their lives forever. "Your mother," he began, then stopped. "How do you tell someone that their entire understanding of their origin story is a lie? That the woman who gave birth to them died believing she was unwanted, unloved, cast aside?" Elena's phone buzzed on the table between them. A text from someone named Jake. "Storm's crazy down here too. Stay safe, beautiful. Can't wait to see you when this clears." "Boyfriend?" Marcus asked, surprised by the sharp twist of something that felt suspiciously like jealousy. A shadow crossed Elena's face. "Jake manages the ski lodge in town. It's complicated." She turned the phone face down. "He's nice, safe, everything a sensible woman should want. But..." The word escaped before Marcus could stop it. Elena's dark eyes met his directly. "But nice and safe don't make your heart race, do they? They don't make you feel like you're finally alive after years of just existing." She paused, color rising in her cheeks, as if she'd revealed more than she intended. "We're not talking about Jake. We're talking about my mother, and why you're looking at me like I'm a miracle and a tragedy rolled into one person." Marcus set down his untouched coffee. Outside, the storm showed no signs of letting up, which meant they had time. Time to tell this story properly. Time to help her understand that she wasn't abandoned so much as stolen from the people who would have loved her. Isabella Santos was 23 when I met her. I was 29 and thought I knew everything about the world. He smiled, but it was edged with old pain. She was working as a translator for a hotel chain we were considering acquiring in New Mexico. The moment she walked into that conference room, everything else just disappeared. Elena leaned forward, drawn despite herself into the story of her origins. She was brilliant, not just beautiful, though God knows she was that. She could see patterns in market data that our best analysts missed. She understood hospitality in a way that went deeper than profit margins. She talked about hotels as places where people could transform themselves, where strangers could become family, where memories were made that lasted lifetimes. "That's exactly how I think about architecture," Elena whispered, "about creating spaces that hold love." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "She would have been so proud of you. The woman you've become, the way you see the world." "Would have been?" Elena's voice sharpened. "Past tense. She's dead, isn't she?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Marcus nodded slowly. 15 years ago, a car accident during a blizzard in Colorado. He swallowed hard. "She was driving to see you. She'd finally found out which adoption agency had placed you." Elena's intake of breath was sharp, painful. "She looked for me, for years. My family made sure she couldn't find you easily." The admission tasted like ash. "My father, my brother David, they convinced me she was just after money. They said she was lying about everything, manipulating me. I was young and stupid, and let them turn me against the only real love I'd ever known." Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "So you're telling me my mother spent my entire childhood searching for me, and your family prevented that from happening?" "Yes." "And you let them?" "Yes." The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of lost years, missed chances. A love story that had been deliberately destroyed by people who thought they knew better. Elena stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "I used to dream about her coming to find me. Sister Maria said that was normal. that all the kids at St. Catherine's had those dreams, but mine felt so real I could almost see her face, almost hear her voice calling my name. She turned back to Marcus. She was real, and she was looking for me. She never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping she'd find a way back to you. But she never found me because your family made sure of that. Elena's voice was getting stronger, anger replacing the initial shock. And now you're here, 30 years later, what? Feeling guilty? Trying to make amends? Marcus stood slowly. I'm here because I can't stay away. Because every time I see you, I see her. Because for 3 months I've been going crazy trying to understand why you feel like the missing piece of something I didn't even know was broken. Don't. Elena held up a hand. Don't you dare make this about your feelings when my mother died alone, believing she was rejected by everyone who was supposed to love her. The accusation hit like a physical blow because it was true. Isabella had died believing Marcus had chosen his family's approval over their love. She died not knowing that he'd spent decades regretting that choice, building an empire that felt empty because she wasn't there to share it with him. Elena's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, not a text. Jake's name lit up the screen, and after a moment's hesitation she answered. Jake? No, I'm fine. The storm is bad, but I'm safe at the resort. A pause. No, you don't need to try to get here. The roads are completely blocked. Another pause, longer this time. I said I'm fine, Jake. I'll call you when the road's clear. She ended the call and immediately turned the phone off completely. Trouble in paradise? Marcus asked, then immediately regretted the sarcasm. Jake thinks he owns me because we've been dating for 6 months. He thinks every conversation needs his input. Every decision needs his approval. Eleanor's frustration was evident. It's suffocating. Then why stay with him? Because he's safe, Eleanor repeated her earlier words. Because he's not the kind of man who would disappear in the night leaving cryptic notes. He's not the kind of man whose family would destroy someone for loving him. The barb hit its mark. Marcus felt the familiar weight of his family's legacy, the knowledge that loving him came with a cost that few people were willing to pay. You're right, he said quietly. My family destroys things. People. Love. It's what we do. Is it what you do? Eleanor challenged. Or is it what you let happen? Before Marcus could answer, the lights flickered and went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Elena moved instinctively closer to Marcus, and he caught her elbow to steady her in the sudden dimness. The contact sent electricity through both of them. Elena looked up at him, and in the red-tinged darkness the resemblance to her mother was almost overwhelming. But this wasn't Isabella. This was Elena, with her own strength, her own fire, her own way of seeing the world. We should check the generator, Elena said, but she didn't move away from him. Elena, Marcus said softly, I need you to know something. Your mother, what happened between us? It wasn't simple. We were both proud, both stubborn. The night she left, we'd had a terrible fight about the future, about whether love was enough to bridge the gap between our worlds. What did you fight about? Marcus closed his eyes, remembering. I'd asked her to marry me. She said yes, but then my father found out. He threatened to disinherit me, to destroy her reputation, to make sure she never worked in the hotel industry again. I told her we could handle it together, that love would be enough. She said she wouldn't be the reason I lost my family. So she left to protect you. And I let her go because I was too proud to fight for her. I thought she'd come back when she realized I'd choose her over everything else. But she never came back. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. She was pregnant. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. If I had, Marcus's voice broke. If I had known about you, I would have torn the world apart to find you both. The generator kicked in with a loud rumble, and the normal lights flickered back to life. In the sudden brightness, Eleanor stepped back, creating distance between them again. But you didn't know. And now she's gone and I'm here. And what are we supposed to do with all of this? Before Marcus could answer, the resort's landline began ringing insistently. Eleanor moved to answer it, but Marcus caught her wrist gently. Don't. Not yet. Please. But Elena was already lifting the receiver. Mountain View Resort. Her face changed as she listened. Yes, he's here. Just a moment. She held out the phone to Marcus. It's your brother. David? Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. David only called during emergencies, and his timing was always impeccable. Suspiciously so. "Marcus?" David's voice carried clearly through the line, smooth and controlled as always. "Thank God you're safe. We've been worried sick." "I'm fine, David. What do you want?" "There's been a development. About the girl, Elena Rodriguez." David's voice sharpened. "We need to talk privately." "Can you get somewhere she can't hear you?" Marcus looked at Elena, who was pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. "She's not going anywhere, David. Whatever you have to say it." "Marcus, please, trust me on this. What I have to tell you, it needs to be private." Elena's eyes met Marcus's across the room. He saw wariness there and something else, fear. She'd learned to recognize the sound of powerful men making decisions about her life without her input. "No," Marcus said firmly. "Elena stays. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of her." The pause that followed stretched long enough that Marcus wondered if the line had gone dead. "Very well," David said finally. "But don't say I didn't warn you. Elena Rodriguez isn't who you think she is, Marcus. We've been investigating her background since she started working at the resort." Elena went very still. The sob story about the cheating fiancé? The tale of struggling to pay off debts? It's all fabricated. David's voice carried the satisfaction of a man delivering a killing blow. "She's a con artist, Marcus. Her real name is Elena Santos Martinez. She's been using multiple identities, targeting wealthy men across 3 states. The debts are real, but they're not from some romantic betrayal. They're from gambling, from bad investments, from a lifestyle she couldn't afford." Marcus felt the floor shift beneath him. "That's not true. There's more. She specifically requested assignment to Mountain View Resort. She's been researching you for months. She knows exactly who you are, exactly what you're worth. This whole innocent act, the connection you think you feel, it's all calculated." Elena's face had gone white. "That's not true," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" David continued. "Tell me, Elena, since I know you're listening. Tell me about the private investigator you hired 6 months ago. Tell me about the research into the Blackwood family history. Tell me about the plan to seduce my brother out of his inheritance." Elena opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Marcus stared at her, searching her face for denial, for outrage, for anything that would contradict David's accusations. Instead, he saw guilt. "Get out," Marcus said quietly. "Marcus, I can explain," Elena started. "Get out!" The roar echoed through the library, and Elena flinched as if he'd struck her. She ran from the room, leaving Marcus alone with the phone and the sound of his brother's satisfied chuckle. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," David said, "but it's better you know now before she could do any real damage." Marcus hung up without responding. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, a different kind of tempest was just beginning. The silence in the library felt like death. Marcus stood frozen, staring at the spot where Elena had been, David's accusations echoing in his mind like poison. A con artist, a calculated seduction. Everything he'd felt, everything he'd believed, reduced to lies and manipulation. But something didn't fit. The way Elena had touched that medallion, the genuine shock in her eyes when they'd connected the pieces. You couldn't fake that kind of raw emotion, could you? Marcus grabbed his coat and headed into the storm. He had to find her, had to look into her eyes when he demanded the truth. The wind cut through him like knives, but he pushed forward, following the path toward the staff quarters. He found Elena in the resort's old chapel, a small stone building that hadn't been used for services in decades. She was sitting in the front pew, still wearing only the light sweater she'd had on in the library, shivering in the cold. Her dark hair was dusted with snow, and she was clutching something in her hands. "You'll freeze to death in here," Marcus said roughly, shrugging out of his coat. Elena looked up, and he was startled to see that she wasn't crying. Her eyes were dry, determined, angry. "Did you think I was going to run? Disappear in the night like some guilty criminal?" Marcus draped his coat around her shoulders, noting how she didn't pull away, but didn't lean into the warmth either. "David's accusations are partially true," Elena interrupted. "That's what makes them so effective." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "So you are—" "I did hire a private investigator." Elena's voice was steady, controlled. 6 months ago. but not to research your wealth or plan some elaborate con. She opened her hands, revealing a bundle of old letters tied with a faded ribbon. I hired him to find out what happened to my mother. Marcus stared at the letters. Where did you get those? From Sister Maria. Before she died last year, she gave them to me. Letters my mother wrote to the adoption agency, begging for information about me. Letters they never forwarded, never responded to. Elena's voice cracked slightly. 23 letters over 15 years, Marcus. 23 attempts to find her daughter, all ignored. Marcus sank into the pew beside her. What did the investigator find? Everything. About you and my mother. About your family's interference. About how she died driving to meet me for the first time. Eleanor's hands tightened on the letters. Did you know she'd finally saved enough money to hire a lawyer? She was going to fight the adoption agency's refusal to help her. Elena, let me finish. Her voice carried an authority that reminded him sharply of Isabella. Yes, I requested assignment to this resort specifically. Yes, I knew who you were when I took the job. But not because I wanted your money. She turned to face him fully. I wanted to understand the man who broke my mother's heart. I wanted to see if you were the monster your family made you out to be, or if you were just another victim of their manipulation. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. And what conclusion did you reach? That you're both, Elena said simply. You're a victim of a family that values control over love. But you're also a man who had the power to choose differently and didn't. The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. She was right. He'd had choices, and he'd made the wrong ones. The gambling debts David mentioned, Marcus asked quietly. Elena's laugh was bitter. My ex-fiancé, remember? The one who stole my savings. What your brother didn't mention is that he was also a Blackwood employee. Did David tell you that part? Marcus went very still. What? Thomas Brennan, regional manager for Blackwood Hotel's Southwest Division. We met at an industry conference where I was presenting my senior architecture project. He was charming, interested in my work, full of plans for our future together. Elena's voice hardened. It took me 6 months to realize he was systematically draining my accounts. By the time I figured it out, he disappeared with everything I had. You think David sent him? I think your brother has been watching me since the day I was born, making sure I never got close enough to threaten his inheritance. Eleanor pulled his coat tighter around herself. Think about it, Marcus. How convenient that Thomas showed up just as I was about to graduate, just as I might have had the resources to search for my mother properly. How convenient that he left me so broke and traumatized I had to take whatever job I could find. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, but not at Elena, at David, at his family, at himself, for being blind to the pattern of manipulation that had defined his entire life. There's something else, Elena continued, about this resort. Did you know your mother designed it? Marcus blinked. What? No, that's impossible. My mother died when I was 12. This resort was built 15 years ago. Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Your mother, Catherine Blackwood, was an architect before she married your father. She specialized in mountain retreats that blended with the natural landscape. She handed him a set of architectural drawings. These are her original plans for a resort in the Colorado Rockies, drawn in 1985. Look familiar? Marcus stared at the drawings. They were identical to Mountain View Resort in every detail, down to the placement of the chapel where they now sat. Where did you get these? From the architectural firm, where my mother worked as a translator. They kept files on projects that were never built. When I started researching your family, I found these in their archives. Elena's voice softened. Your mother dreamed of building a place where families could reconnect, where love could heal old wounds. Your father buried those dreams along with her. Marcus felt tears threatening for the first time in decades. His mother's dreams, realized 15 years after her death, without anyone knowing she was the true architect. David had this built using her plans? David. No. Elena shook her head. You did, Marcus. You commissioned this resort. You chose this location, approved these designs. David tried to talk you out of it, remember? He said it was too expensive, too remote, wouldn't be profitable. The memories came flooding back. The strange certainty he'd felt about this location, the way the architectural plans had seemed perfect, despite coming from a relatively unknown firm. He'd overruled David's objections. and built his mother's dream without knowing it. It's like she was guiding you, Elena whispered. Like she wanted this place to exist so we could find each other here. Marcus looked around the chapel, seeing it with new eyes. His mother's vision, his lost love's daughter, a storm that had trapped them together long enough for truth to emerge. It felt like destiny, like the universe finally correcting old wrongs. But Elena was pulling away, standing up despite the cold. Where are you going? Back to town, as soon as the road's clear. This changes nothing, Marcus. I'm still the daughter of the woman you abandoned. You're still the man who let his family destroy my mother's life. Elena, please. No. She turned to face him, and he saw Isabella's fire burning in her eyes. I came here to understand my history, and I have. I came here to see if you were capable of love, and you are. But I also came here to see if you were strong enough to fight for it, and you're not. That's not fair, isn't it? David calls with accusations, and you immediately believe him. You don't even give me a chance to explain before you're ordering me out of the room. Elena's voice rose. You did the same thing to my mother 30 years ago, didn't you? Let your family convince you she was wrong for you. Let them drive her away instead of fighting for what you claimed to love. Marcus stood slowly, his heart hammering. You're right, about all of it. I've been a coward my entire life, letting other people make my choices for me. But Elena, I'm asking you not to leave. I'm asking you to give me a chance to be the man I should have been 30 years ago. Why? So you can fail me the same way you failed her? So I can prove that some things are worth fighting for. Elena stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus held his breath. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to weaken, which meant the roads would clear soon. Time was running out. There's one more thing, Elena said finally. Something I found in my mother's letters that you need to know. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, different from the others, newer. This isn't from the adoption agency files. This is something my mother left with Sister Maria to be given to me when I turned 25. Marcus took the letter with trembling hands. It was addressed to him. My beloved Marcus, he read aloud. If Elena is reading this to you, then she has found her way to you as I always hoped she would. I never told you about our daughter because I was afraid. Afraid you would think I was trying to trap you, afraid your family would use her against us, afraid of destroying the love we had with the responsibilities of parenthood. Marcus's voice broke, but he continued reading. I want you to know that leaving you was the hardest thing I ever did, but staying would have been harder. I saw how your family looked at me, how they whispered about the poor girl trying to climb above her station. I couldn't bear the thought of you growing to resent me, or of our daughter growing up believing she wasn't good enough for the world she was born into. Tears were flowing freely now for both of them. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and Elena is old enough to make her own choices about love, about family, about forgiveness. I have watched you from afar, Marcus, and I know you have built something beautiful with your life. Our daughter has your strength and your dreams. Love her the way you loved me. Fight for her the way I wish you had fought for us. Marcus looked up to find Elena watching him with tears in her eyes. She forgave you, Elena whispered. Even after everything, she forgave you. But do you? Before Elena could answer, they heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Multiple engines moving fast. Marcus looked out the chapel window to see a convoy of black SUVs pulling up to the resort's main entrance. David, he said grimly. He's not taking any chances this time. Elena stood, squaring her shoulders. Then I guess it's time to see what you're really made of, Marcus Blackwood. Are you going to let your brother control your life for another 30 years? Or are you finally going to fight for something that matters? Marcus looked at her standing there in his coat, chin raised defiantly, ready to face down an empire for the truth. She was Isabella's daughter, but she was also her own woman. Stronger perhaps than either of her parents had been, tempered by loss and betrayal, but not broken by them. I'm going to fight, he said quietly, for you. For your mother's memory. For the family we should have been. Elena nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Then let's go remind your brother that some things can't be bought, sold, or manipulated. Some things are worth more than all the money in the world. They walked out of the chapel together, into the clearing storm, ready to face whatever David Blackwood thought he could throw at them. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 30 years. Hope. The final confrontation was about to begin, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Blackwood was ready to fight for love.